Hello everyone, Colin Canet here for Woodwork Web. Today we're back with part 2 of making your own router table, and today we're going to be making the router table top. And there's a number of elements that go into this, so I'm going to go through a bit of a parts list before you even start so that you make sure that you get all of the parts and pieces that you need. And in our case, we're using exactly the same thing as most of the commercial tabletop manufacturers use. It's a 1-inch high density MDF material, and I had to get my lumber store to cut a 2-foot wide section from their 4x8 sheet because they didn't have any, and they typically don't have any pre-cut in smaller sections. The second thing I'm going to use, and this is up to you, you can use it or not, I'm going to be using a light colored arborite. Now you're going to need a router. You're also going to need, of course, contact cement if you're going to be using, putting on an arborite top. There's some screws. We're going to do a close-up of those in a second. There's also a router bit. We'll do a close-up of that in a second. The other thing that I recommend that you do is to buy yourself a router insert, and you're probably going to have to drill holes for your router, and we're going to do that with one of ours. I have an aluminum one here. This is actually an aircraft aluminum, so I'm told. We're not going to use this one today. We are going to use a plastic one, and these plastic ones are quite good. There's a variety of different insert plates that you can purchase, and Craig have one that I have used as well, and it's also very good. But we have this one today, and we're going to use it. I don't even know what the manufacturer of this one is. I'm sorry, but it's just one that I had here, so we're going to use it today. A couple of other things that you're going to need. This is the bottom of my router base, and you can see that it has a screw in it, and that is actually a pan head screw. And because I'm going to need to remove this base, you can see that there's plastic there and that base actually comes off of there. I'm going to need to take the screws out, and there's 3 of them, and replace them with these countersink kinds of screws, because in the base that I'm using, because it's plastic, we're going to have to drill holes. It already has some holes, but we're going to ignore those and put our own holes in because they'll have a different placement, and then we're going to have to countersink them. And the only feasible way for us to do it, or the easiest way for us to do it, is with countersink screws. Now you're also going to need to prepare some wood, and it depends on the bit you have on exactly what you're going to do. So you'll have to determine that yourself, but that's not hard. What I do want to show you is the bits, or the bit that we're going to be using. And in this case, we're going to be using this red bit, and it will be sitting in the router like this, because we're going to be using this router freehand. It will be sitting in the router like this, and this bearing is going to be used with this wood, and it'll be used. This is called a pattern bit. Now don't get it confused. You can see that the bearing is near the shank. Don't get it confused with a flush trim bit, which this one, you'll notice the bearings on this one is at the bottom, not up near the shank. I've set up my table saw, and the panel that we're going to be cutting is going to be 24 inches wide and 32 inches long. And that's sort of become a bit of an industry standard for these kinds of tops. The blade I'm using is just a general purpose blade, and it will do a good job of cutting this. Then that should just break. Should just break. There it is. Okay, I'm ready to start applying the gel contact cement, and it's critical that there's no dirt or dust on here because that will telegraph through. So our contact cement is dry now, but before we put the pieces together, I'm going to use my Tackwise stapler and just put some stops along here, probably 4 of them. And now all I need to do is butt it up to those sticks at the end, make sure it overlaps. I'll pull out the center stick, and now I can push that down. There's our tabletop. We're ready to cut the hole for the plate. And when you cut the hole for the plate, a lot of people make the mistake of very carefully centering the plate in the middle. But no, the plate wants to be more like a third at the top third or the bottom third, however you're looking at it. But there wants to be more space in one area, because when you mount the router in the plate, you want to have sufficient room to work, and from where you're standing at the camera side, this is where you would be working from. This is where the fence would be typically, and we don't need nearly that much room for the fence. So we're going to move it up here, and I'm going to mark it at 11 inches on each side, and then we're going to surround it with this wood that I have like this. And we're going to put the wood right tight up against it, and then we're going to cut. Before I finish gluing down the other 2 sides, there's something I want to show you. When I put this on here and butt this right up against here and the top one, it's going to give me an extremely tight fit. In fact, it's going to be so tight that it will be difficult to put this plate in. So what I'm going to use is just use a veneer in here to give me just a little bit of room at the bottom or at the side and at the top, and that will allow the plate to it should just drop in when we get finished cutting that hole. We're ready to start cutting, and I've set up my dust collector to try and collect some of the ambient dust. Now, we still can't put our plate in here because obviously this is still stuck in here. And I should tell you that there's different ways of cutting these out. I've just shown you one of 3 or 4 different ways of doing it. What I need to do is get this piece out of here now, and I'm going to use my jigsaw to cut this out. And what I'm going to do is drill 4 holes in the 4 corners so that I can put the blade down and just run a line all the way along in there. And then I may have to do a little bit of cleanup of that as well. One of the last things that we need to do is to put some height adjustment in here, and I wanted this plate to be below the surface of the router table so that we can lift it. Now I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and adjust these so that they're level. Now the last thing we have to do to get this all ready is we need to drill holes because this plate doesn't fit this router plate. And if you're buying, for example, a Craig plate, a blank Craig plate or another brand, you'll have to drill holes in it. And you want to be as close to the center for the bit as you can, but you don't have to be perfect because in a router it doesn't really matter because everything will center to the bit once you're cutting anyway. You just need to get it as close as you can. Now I'm going to take the plate off this and we'll use it as a pattern and we'll flip this over and drill those holes. Now I just put a couple pieces of that double-sided tape on there and I'm going to use that to make sure it doesn't move around too much. And now I'm just going to countersink those holes. Well, after a little bit of fiddling, a little bit of fine tuning, we did get that plate on there, and it's got 4 screws on there. They often only have 3, but this one has 4, so it's good and sturdy. And now we can do a little bit of assembly. Well, we could call this table done. We've got the router attached to the plate, we've got the legs, we have the top. I've not attached the top to the legs yet, but we're going to drop this in anyway just to have a look. Now, we could use the router just like this, and I know some of you are saying, what are we going to do for fence? Well, we're going to do for a fence, we're not going to make a fence in the typical sense. What we're going to use is an ordinary straight piece of wood clamped on both sides, and believe it or not, this makes one of the best fences for a router that you can get. In many cases it's as good or better than some of the commercial versions. But next week we have a little bit of a surprise for you because we've discovered a new product accessory. Not everyone who makes a router table is going to want this, but we thought it was interesting that you might want to have a look at it. So make sure you tune in next week and see what we have as a surprise when we finish off our router table. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.